Isn't this fantastic? Wouldn't you be proud of a drive like this? Well, it's took me about a fortnight to construct this. Looking back a fortnight or so ago, it's hard to remember what the old tarmac looked like. Well, the surface was breaking up badly and I needed to replace it. And I was looking for something that was going to be more permanent and more attractive. We've selected block paving, concrete block paving. I think you've got to agree that really does look attractive, and it is long lasting. And I began to ask myself, what would happen if the car spilled a few drops of oil? Well, it's easy, because all you would need to do is replace the odd block. What happens perhaps if you've got a block drain or a new service needs to go underneath it? Easy, you unzip a row of blocks, put the base back, put the blocks back, you wouldn't know anybody touched it. So overall, it was everything I was looking for. Permanent, attractive, yet flexible. When we say flexible, look how the curves here lend themselves to this area. They complement the front of the house. They actually look good against the curved walls at the front there. So it was really what I was looking for. Then I began to panic about the price. Well, if you think about it, if you were to do it all yourself, you've only got the cost of the materials. On the other hand, if you're not all that fit or a DIY fan, you may want to bring a professional in to do the whole job. We reached a compromise. I'm reasonably fit, I'm quite a DIY fan, but we decided to start with to have this professional plan drawn with professional dimensions on. This gives us something to work from, something to measure out. But it also gives us that artistic flair. I think you've got to agree with all these lovely curves of the drive and the walls. It was well worth getting an artistic designer involved. The other area we're going to use some help is in the actual digging out. That saves us some time. I then began to look at the actual area and wondered about materials. And with the artistic designer, he suggested that we go to our local builder's merchant and look at the range of materials that's on offer. The Marley block paving range includes Interset, the original interlocking paving block. Classico can be used for creating circles, curves and fans. Antique is particularly suitable for blending with older properties. Trio, with its unusual 3:1 ratio, gives greater design possibilities. Homestyle, around half the size of Interset, is lighter and easier to install, being specifically designed for use around homes. Elto, the L-shaped block, gives additional design opportunities over traditional rectangular blocks. To complement the blocks, a full range of curbs, edge restraints and accessories are available. All of these may be purchased in a range of colours and are illustrated in the pocket guide to Marley paving. Now my drive is probably the worst scenario we could have had. It's a difficult site in so much as there are no manholes at the front to take away the surface water. We have installed 2 drains, and to get rid of that water we will need to dig an actual soakaway. We'll show you how to construct that. While we were digging, we came across a spring right behind me. We had to put a section of land drain in to drain that away. Now we've covered all these different elements of building the drive in the video. For a lot of you, it'll be relatively simple to complete some of these stages. You won't have all the problems I've had. So what I suggest is you view the whole video to start with and then look at it stage by stage. At the end of each section you'll find there's a checklist. So view a stage, check the checklist. When you've completed it, then I suggest you move on to the next stage. This drive actually slopes backwards to the house, so we have a drainage problem. We've got to overcome that. It's not difficult, we'll show you how. We've got a water meter, a stopcock there, there's an underground gas pipe runs to the meter in the garage. Take all those into account. They are all constraints. You need to work out when you're going to do certain things. Can you do the whole job in perhaps just a couple of weekends? Or are you going to spread it over several weeks or even a couple of months? If so, and you've got a vehicle, where's it going to stand? Where are the materials going to stand as they arrive? You need to plan these stages fairly carefully. So it is important to plan the dates. Plan the dates also when you're going to order just a couple of items of equipment. There's a block splitter you can hire from your local DIY shop. It makes the cutting of the blocks much easier, much faster and much more accurate. And the second machine you're going to need to hire is a vibrating plate. Now this is a fairly large plate, perhaps 18 inches, 45 centimetres square, which is used to consolidate the base and to vibrate the blocks onto the sand bed. So you plan the dates you want to hire it, tell the local hire company, and usually they'll deliver it for you. So it's a matter of planning all the different stages to come together. The other few tools you'll need, spades, forks, shovels, a spirit level, perhaps a lump hammer, things like that. I'm sure you'll have those around the garden. So let's just recap on those main points. You can see here we've just dribbled the sand along roughly the area of the proposed new paving. Now it pays to dig just a little bit bigger, so you might need to do a little bit of movement either side. Then you've got to think what you're going to do with the material you dig out. Well, this was actually a very good flower bed, so I'm going to save this soil. I've got the barrow here, and I'm going to transport the topsoil, the good quality garden soil, up the garden, maybe to use in a bed later on. However, where the old drive was here, we've got some tarmac, we've got some edging curbs. You could have some subsoil, really sticky subsoil. You may want to get rid of that, either with a skip or a lorry, whatever. Use a barrow carefully, load the lorry, skip carefully, and dig out to the right depth. Now, the right depth really is governed by a number of factors. Let me just explain a bit more about this damp-proof course. Now, this is an older house, and we've actually got a slate damp-proof course here. Some houses, more modern ones, may have a felt damp-proof course. In some cases, you may only see a slightly wider course of mortar, but that really is a very important level. The damp-proof course, we need to measure down from that 150 millimetres at the minimum. I put a tape measure in there, be able to see we're going to go down 150 millimetres to the top of the paving, but we actually dug out a total of 360 millimetres, or 14 inches if you prefer to be in the old inches, to take in the actual base and the sand below the block. Let me take that out and show you what I mean. We're going to have a block which is going to go right about there, which is our 150 millimetres from the damp proof to the top of the block. And below that we're going to put 50 millimetres of a very special grade of sand. I'll explain that later. And underneath the sand we want about 100 millimetres of a special grade of stone. Again, we'll show it you later. So you can go to 2 courses below the damp-proof course, you can come up to 1.5, but you don't want to be any closer than that. So the next stage is quite a bit of digging. And remember, if you can save materials, you do. You dig it out by hand like that. And if you've got a small drive, you may choose to do this yourself. Saves money, may take quite a bit of time, you may be able to use the materials elsewhere in the garden. But there is another way of doing it. You can actually hire small diggers like this. Well, we've nearly done all the digging out. You might think this is the hard stage. It takes a little bit longer than some of the other stages, but it's one worth getting right. The one thing you want to check when you think you've got most of the soil out is to walk the site. Really put your heels down, because it's important we've got a good firm base. As you can see here, this is really hard ground, there'll be no settlement, it'll work a treat when we come to pave the area. But just behind me, there's a really soft spot. I'd like to show you how to deal with that. This is what we mean by a really soft spot. You can see the heel goes down there. Now the problem is this is wet, it's soft ground, and if we try and put the base layers in and then the blocks, this could actually settle or move, it almost be flexible. So to prevent that, what we've got to do is to dig out deeper than that 360 millimetre we calculated until we actually hit solid ground. So the next thing to do, I say, is to start digging there until we hit something more solid. This is a result of water running down the old drive towards the house here, settled here, and this is why we've got this wet spot. When you've located soft spots, they should be dug out until you reach a firm base. And then we start adding stones in layers of no more than 100 millimetres at a time, consolidating it before adding another layer. And then we finally build it up to the original base level. Now you might get soft spots where perhaps you've taken out a tree, or if you're developing a block area where it hasn't been consolidated before. So it is very important to walk the whole site, checking for soft spots and rectifying them before we go on to the next stage. Now we have to establish some levels. It's very important that the water doesn't run down the drive towards the house. We want it to run away from it. So we're going to put a crossfall, as we call it, away from the house. I'll show you how to establish that in a minute. We have a slight problem on this drive, that it also runs from the highway in this direction. So in effect what we've got to create is almost a well or channel. So the water runs away from the house, down the drive, and then we want to channel it to a drain at the far end there. I'll show you that in a minute. So that will pick up the surface water. We've got several problems here because the damp-proof course, which is here, in theory, we said we should be 150 millimetres below it. So if we put on a little bed of sand, a couple of bricks to get us out there, and then put a spirit level on and come out absolutely level, the water wouldn't run away. We need to drop that something like to 1 in 40. In other words, if that was 40 inches, it would drop 1 inch. If it was 40 centimetres, it would drop 1 centimetre. So it's the angle that we're interested in. That is quite important to run the water away. But let me just show you how we've actually contoured the land. We actually use a line, and we set this 1.25 metres out from the house wall, and we keep checking that we've got 210 millimetres below the line. That's the 100 millimetres for the base we're going to use, 50 mil for the sand, and 60 mil for the blocks. So we keep checking all the way as we go, and if it's not right, shovel a little bit out. There we are, 210, spot on again. That's just over 8.5 inches. As we come forward here, you'll see we have a slight further problem. That to keep the water running all the way down, we've got to make a fall in this direction as well. So it needs to come downhill, and in order to do that, we have to make the angle across here slightly steeper than 1 in 40. Let me show you. There's level again. That is absolutely level, and it's 6 inches, 150 millimetres below the damp-proof course. But in this time, instead of going as we went back there a 1 in 40 fall, we've made that considerably steeper, about 1 in 25. And instead of being, as we were on the previous peg, 30 millimetres down from level, this is actually 80 millimetres down from level. So the water is channelled into this corner. And I'll say then all the way along, we've been checking with a shovel that we've still got 210 millimetres below the line. And then we can just check as we come across there that our drain we're setting in here is just slightly below level. If it was absolutely level, the water wouldn't find it. So just a very slight fall to that. And that will be the corner of our drive. So that will pick up all the water coming in this direction. The other water will go that way, and none of the water will actually harm the house. It'll be picked up before it reaches it. In preference, we would normally pipe the surface water to our nearest storm drain, using a conventional gully pot, as you can see here. However, in this instance, there isn't one, so we'll be providing drainage by means of a sump. We've actually dug a hole here some 2 metres deep and 1 metre square. Now we call this a sump, a drainage sump. And the idea is, you can see the water there, that's the water table level, which is lower than our drive's going to be. We're actually going to run 2 channels in here, 2 drainage pipes, to take the water off this half of the drive. We're going to do another sump in the far corner there to pick up the water on the top corner. Now what we're going to do here is fill it with a grade of stone or pebbles so it takes the bulk up, come to within about 45 centimetres of the surface, cover it with polythene, we can put topsoil back on, it'll be our flower bed. The next stage is to lay the sub-base. This is this 100 millimetre layer of stone. Let me explain a little bit more about this stone, because this is the really important stage. This is what we call DPT Type 1, the same material in fact as used when councils build roads, highways, etc. It's good enough for them, it's good enough for our little bit of paving. you shouldn't use, and it wouldn't work if you tried to, things like crushed brick ends or hogging. They are not suitable for this particular job. But before we spread it, we need to just mark out the area. I step backwards slightly. I've marked out here because under the window we're going to have a small bed with some containers in, as the plan shows, and I've used some sand, marked it out, and that is where my curb edge is going to go. On this side will be the block paving. As remembered earlier, we put these two very, very important pegs in. That was the level peg. That was level from 150 millimetres below the damp-proof course. We came down 80 millimetres here to get the fall to the drain, and then I've marked on there in pencil the 60 millimetres for the actual block, the 50 millimetres for the sand, and below it I've got just over 100 millimetres there for my stone. And if you remember, we also made sure there was just a slight fall from that peg to our gully pot here that's going to take away any surface water. And by the way, I've put a bag over that just to stop any stone dropping down it and blocking it up while I'm spreading the material. So the next stage is to take a shovel, and if you do this carefully, and there are 2 or 3 little tricks here, if you shovel off the side of the heap and swing and spread, it takes a lot less effort and a lot less barrowing than just stabbing the shovel into the heap. And what you must do then is to keep going back to that peg and have a little look. There's my mark, just down there, so we're just about right. We've got to come up yet quite a little bit. Let's take a few more shovelfuls, build it up in layers. Now if I was using more than 100 millimetres of stone, say I was making up a low site, I'd put it in 2 goes. You mustn't put in more than 100 millimetres at one go. And you see how that's spreading out there. Now let's have a little check on that. So we've got to level the whole area just roughly with the stone. Then we're going to vibrate it down, put our strings through, get our ideas of the levels. Because one thing that's almost certain, we're going to have to do a little bit of juggling about once we've got the stone in to make sure those levels are perfect. This is our vibrating plate. It's ticking over nicely there. This is one of the 2 items that we'd need to hire, and this is to consolidate the ground. We've got a rough level. We're going to go over it several times, as many as necessary. Once in that direction, turn round, come back, and when we've done it that way, we'll then cross backwards and forwards, turning at each end till we consolidate it evenly, till we've got a nice smooth surface. It's an easy to use machine, but just a couple of little safety points. I am wearing, as you can see here, safety toe cap protectors. All the way through the work, it's worth wearing safety boots. And also with the machine came a set of earmuffs. It is a little bit noisy, so I'm going to put them on and show you how to vibrate this sub-bass down. Now the next stage is to install the edge restraints or curbs. We've chosen one here which I call a bull nose. It's got a bull nose on that side. It can be arranged in other patterns, in other ways round, and there are different patterns available. But in this case we want our bull nose to sit 50 millimetres, 2 inches above the rest of the paving. In fact, we've put a peg in here that shows you the finished level of the paving. That's where the block paving will finish. And I've put a little mark on this block just to demonstrate to you, by pushing into the mortar I've got ready, that that will be the level of the paving, and I've put a string in already just at the right height. Let me explain that that string has come off some levels on this side. We've gauged this 50 millimetres above the finished surface level. We've done the same that end, and we've put a very tight builder's line down, so it stretches tight. It's got to be a builder's line. And then I've got a 3-in-1 or 4-in-1 mix of grit, sand and cement. Now there is something very important here. Keep it on the dry side. You keep it dry, it's much easier to work. You can't take water out, but it's easy to add a drop if it's a little bit too stiff. So I'm going to just work in a little more in front of my line there. And it's best to prepare a good base first. It's easy if you prepare the whole base. Now I've actually done away with that peg now, I don't need that anymore, we'll take that out of the way. And I've got a straight edge, and I'm going to start and prepare a base. I know my block is 150 millimetres deep, so I'm going to try and gauge a nice level bed about 145, 147 millimetres below the line. And I say if this was too wet, then they'd float everywhere. Got a measure handy? Let's just have a little look how we're doing. It's about 145, 147 millimetre, so it gives 3 millimetres to tap down. Yeah, just under 150. Let's just try a block, see how he fits. That's not too far out. No, just that little bit high. That's quite okay. We can just give him, making sure he's in line at the front. The line here is giving us both the height and the direction that the blocks are going. So that one's fitted in. Very nice indeed. Ensure that you drop the blocks flush to one another and be sure that you don't trap any debris or mix between them. Now, I've got those to finish yet. There's quite a few to go in there. I'll let you into a secret. I've already put most of them down. Let me just show you what we've been doing. It's really beginning to look more like the plan. We've got our edge restraints in there, and those are going to be the 50 millimetre higher that we said a moment or two ago. There's a rather important detail here. We've used an edge block between the actual paved area and the council highway, and this should be well concreted in, so if anything happened, the council highway is taken away or moved, or if anything went wrong, they could dig up without our drive falling over there. But if we come along this row of blocks now we've installed, you can see here that some of the mortar mix has come to the front. Now if we leave that there and it goes off and sets hard, we shall have a problem, because remember the brick sits down there somewhere, for the surface of the brick, then we've got 60 millimetres, and then we've got the sand underneath, 60 millimetre thick block, 50 millimetres of sand on average. But we need to be able to compress that block onto the sand to bed it in. So if we leave this mix here, it's going to be in the way. So it's worth taking that out and bringing it round to the back to what we call haunch it up. This means then that any weight and any restraining will be done by the curb here, but it won't tip back because of this layer of mortar we're going to build at the back of it. And then we can turn the back of the trowel that way and produce this nice haunching effect, which gives us a strength. It retains the blocks in the right position, stops any sand filtering through. The next stage is to screed out the sand. Let me just explain a little bit first about this sand. It is a very special type of sand in some respects. It's a sharp washed sand, a gritty sort of sand. We couldn't use soft sand for it. This is a nice angular material. There's coarse and fines in it. It'll vary slightly in colour, quarry to quarry, but you ask for a coarse, washed, sharp sand, you'll get the right material. What I want to do is to put in a 50 millimetre layer, and we've got to consolidate that. So what I'm doing is raking out approximately 50 millimetres to start with, getting some ideas of levels, bringing that rake backwards and forwards nice and gently. If you happen to pull a stone up from the sub-base layer, then pick that out, because it does make hard work later if you get a stone just under a block when we come to levelling. There's a stone come up by the sound of it. Take that sort of thing out. And when you've got it out to the level that you want, the next stage is to go over with a vibrating plate. Having consolidated that 50 mil layer of sand, it'll have gone down slightly, so there'll probably only be about 40 millimetres there now. That allows us to top it up with a further 10 to 15 mil of the concreting sand, but in this case we're going to leave it loose so that it'll work its way between the blocks when we set them on. This gives a really strong binding action, and the angular particles in the sand really means they lock together well. So what we need to do now is to take it, and by the way, we've only done a small area here because you shouldn't really lay more sand than you can lay blocks on that area in a day. There are a couple of restrictions. You don't want to leave it out overnight and possibly get wet. If it gets wet, you can't lay blocks. The ground's frozen, the sand's frozen. We can't lay blocks. In fact, there's a nice little test you can do. If you take a handful of this sand, you can do what we call the snowball test. You take it like that. If it falls apart, then it's too dry. And if there's water films on the surface there, it's too wet to use. So if it looks like rain, cover that heap over, don't let it get wet. So what we need to do now is to add this next layer to it. And there is a little trick we can do. Put it on the shovel like that, and we're going to turn ourselves, keeping the shovel parallel to the ground and turning it as we go. That way we can spread it evenly and save any raking out. We don't want to disturb the consolidated area. We want to leave this top layer nice and loose. This last 15 mil or so is going to be compacted when we've got the blocks in place. So we need to allow something like 5 millimetres for settlement. You can't give an exact figure because some sands will compact more than others, and it depends on the moisture content. So what I've done, I've measured off my curb here. Now, originally I wanted to finish 50 millimetres down, so I've measured down 45 millimetres to allow 5 millimetres more for settlement, and I've set a block on some sand here and put a line on. So I've allowed for it to settle finished level approximately, because of the sand will vary a little, 50 mil down. Now at the far end there I've got a slight complication because we're running into our gully pot there, and here we need to be that 5 mil higher to allow for settlement, but we're also allowing 5 millimetres for the block to finish just above the drain gully. We don't want the actual block to be behind and lower than the gully, so as you can see there it's 10 millimetres in this instance higher than the gully pot. And now we put in some rails here. These rails happen to be pieces of galvanised tube. They could be timber laths, they could be almost anything that is smooth and even we can lay into the sand. Nothing too big, but I think this idea of galvanised tube is a good little trick. And if we try our block on here, here's the standard block we're going to use. All our blocks in this pattern are 60 mil thick. You can see that just nicely goes under there like that. So that is just perfect at that depth. Now if I move along slightly and come down here, we need to keep checking that the block will just go underneath the string. And you can see there that it's not, it's too high, so this rail has got to be gently tapped down into the sand, not disturbing the far end. Keep checking it. There we can see that's just sitting on it a tree. The next thing then is to screed off the surplus sand that's sticking up above these rails. Now this is the screeding stage, and this is quite important. This is the final bed to lay our blocks on. We've got an area there that we'll trowel out later. Because of the curve in the line of the edge restraints, we can't get our straight edge to it. It is a straight edge. Use anything as long as it's a good straight edge, and the secret is just to work backwards, drawing the surplus sand as you come. Now we've got plenty of sand in there. If you run out of sand and you find there's an area that you've not completely filled, an area like that, then take some surplus sand, scatter it back in over the low spots, just go back and draw it across. Now we're not tamping it down, we're just drawing it out